I was like trying to learn all the parts off that Battles album, that first one, the AP or album, that one with Atlas and Tonto and all. I was like, how the fuck is, like, I was doing it, and then I meet these guys and they're like, by the way, John Stanier is our drummer. I was like, what? Yeah, I got to fill in that for that guy? What do you mean?
All right, everybody, welcome. And this is Behind the Break. My name is CJ, the Pineapple Drummer, aka Modus from Chaosis. Today, I am joined by a fellow Dream cymbal in Dorsey. I'll give a bit of his credentials quickly before we actually introduce our esteemed guest. So he's endorsed by CC in Drum and Dream Cymbals. He is an Adelaide Drum Teacher. He's a touring and session muso who's done music director work and a lot of drum tech work as well. He's most known for his post-punk band, the Mark of Cain. He's also featured in Drum magazine a fair few times. Also performed as a demonstrator and a clinician at both the Ultimate Drummers Weekend and the Barossa Drum Festival. And is also very big into his drum and music academy called the Backbeat Academy, which is in Stepney, South Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the one and only Mr. Eli Green. How are you today, man?
I'm great, mate. Thank you so much for having me on. That was quite the introduction.
Yeah. Oh, mate, I'm big. I go big.
I like it. I feel like I've just like rolled up to a red carpet event and I've been announced. You know?
Well, it's the black background event. Let's put it that way.
I like it. It's dark. It's mysterious.
Yeah,
What's back there? What's he hiding? Who knows?
Well, I'll be really honest. It's just a black curtain, and then there's my drum kit and stuff like that is behind this. So there's nothing really there. So, but yeah, no, mate. I sent you an email literally the day before we were doing this today, and I was just like, hey, man, would love to have you jump on the podcast. Literally, I think half an hour later, I got an email, and so glad to have had you on board and all of that, man. So really, really appreciate that, and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, man. So
that's okay, man. Clearly, I had nothing on, so no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I was actually flat out, but it just happened to arrive at a time where I was like, you know what? I actually have a pocket of time tomorrow. A couple of people, weren't coming into their lessons because Easter's coming up, and let's do it.
Let's go. So the first one I always like to ask, first of all, is where are you in the world and what are you up to currently?
I am in Adelaide. Well, right now I'm in Stepney, South Australia, in my lovely teaching academy, which you talked about before. And what am I up to? I am starting a 13-hour day of drum lessons.
Oh wow!
Yep, it's gonna be a big one.
Hey, but when I don't know, for some drummers that do really enjoy teaching, like myself, it is as much as a really long day as it is an awesome day at the same time. Some people just hate teaching outright, and some people just absolutely love to do it. So clearly you wouldn't be doing a 13-hour day if you didn't enjoy what you were doing, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate to do what I do and to have this part of my business, being doing so well at the moment. It was only a couple of years ago where every musician and teacher in the world went, oh my God, like where are we going to make our money from and how are we going to survive? And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to move into a cool new space, and which you can see behind me, and yeah, things are going really well. And I do enjoy it. Like I feel a bit guilty sometimes when I talk to my friends about, like what we do for work, and they're complaining about long shifts and shitty bosses. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, my job's good. I get to hang out with cool people and play drums all day. Like,
I was the exact same. I literally had that happen to me yesterday. So I can 100% relate to it.
It's kind of awkward, isn't it? Because it's still work. Like there's still things that suck about it, but at the same time, you're like, it's pretty good. It's not that bad.
So much better. And the thing is too, is when the awkward pause in that conversation where there's a few people that are complaining about it, then they all look at you and I'm like, yeah, I like my job.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got nothing to contribute to this conversation. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. No, everything's cool. I like it. I get to hang out with cool people. I'm really fortunate. A lot of my students, like, they're all rad. Like, they're just cool people and they all want to be here, which makes a massive difference to me. It makes me really motivated. And even on the days where I'm feeling a bit meh about it all, maybe I'm just woken up on the wrong side of the bed or whatever, you know, someone will come in and just be like, dude, I had a breakthrough while I was practicing my paradiddles. And I just go like, holy crap, like that's cool. And it just gets me revved up to kind of, you know, it just resets my engine a bit. So
I kind of feel
yeah,
like it's a 50-50 fueling of like, if you're having a bit of a meh day or you're like tired or whatever the case is, and then a student comes in and yeah, they bring such positive energy, it lifts
yeah,
you back up. Then there's
massively.
sometimes where you're in a really good mood because you've had a good day of practice or whatever, and they're in a bit of a miserable mood, and then you get to pick them up and be like, hey, no, man, you're doing
Yes.
really good. Like, keep going, you know?
Absolutely. There's like, you know, a lot of my students joke that like their drum lesson is their therapy. You know, we spend like half the time just like talking about what's going on in their life, and you know, which I think actually is very informative as a teacher because it gives me information as like when to push them and when to like hang back and just go like, look, they got a lot going on. Let's just like play some tunes and have fun. You know, so but yeah, they come in and you know, sometimes yeah, they're a mess. They've had a terrible day or whatever, but they've shown up to drums, and you know, it's my job to just kind of give them like, you know, a bit of a fun time and yeah, motivate them, or just give them like, yeah, a little bit of an experience that they can use to help lighten the load a little bit. So yeah, it's
100%.
I love my job. It's really cool.
Oh man, well, we're going to get into a bit a lot of that I think in a little bit, but the one thing to kind of set the tone for this podcast is what do you define in your career as a musician, especially as a drummer? What do you define as your breakthrough moment, or at least moments in your career?
Okay. It's a little tricky because I think I'm perhaps a harsh judge on myself. So like I've got a bit of that imposter syndrome thing kicking in. So sometimes when I go like, you know, where am I at? I kind of go, well, I'm still very much at the start, but you know, kind of look around and this is all awesome. And, you know, I've been afforded a lot of great opportunities through my career. So, you know, obviously I'm, I'm further along that road than I probably like to think I am, but yeah, it's hard for me to kind of be like, when did I break through? Cause I think I'm still trying to do that in a lot of ways. But I guess, you know, humility aside, like there definitely was some times thinking back that were like real jumping off points for things to start like churning over a bit more. I think probably the first thing that I would say is like a massive contributor to my success and my trajectory in my career was actually like dropping out of high school.
Right.
Which is a strange like breakthrough moment, but it was the moment that I realized that I just wanted to do music. I was fine at school, like I didn't go much, but I was a good student, but I hated the mentality around that style of education. The area I grew up in was a small country town, so it was pretty like closed-minded towards the arts and stuff. So there weren't a lot of like-minded people in my community. And I had a few experiences of like actually getting to step out of that and make music with some other people. And like when I was in, you know, the earlier years of high school, and as I sort of got to the end of it, I was like, man, like this sucks. Like I need to go do something else. And to, you know, my parents' credit, like they were super supportive. My mum was just like, yeah, like if you want to drop out at the end of year 11 and, you know, not finish school, but go do something else, that's fine. Her only prerequisite was that I, you know, have some sort of equivalent qualification. So at the end of year 11, I auditioned for music school and got in, although it was like a whole complicated thing. They actually like lost my application for a while. So I actually started year 12, but then I got a call from the admin being like, yo, the class starts next week. You haven't enrolled. What the fuck? And I was like, I'm not in. I'm in class right now. And they're like, no, you're not. You're going to music school next week. I'm like, holy shit. So that was cool. So that was nice. But yeah, like that moment of like sort of going like, well, this isn't for me. This feels much more in line with what I want out of life, and who I am. That was a massive first step. And then that sort of opened me up to like, you know, meeting a lot of people that I still work with today. Like, you know, there were a lot of people who I worked in bands with for a long time. From there, I still work with some of them today, like Nick, the bass player in Life Pilot, I met at music school. And, you know, we ended up living together and stuff. And, you know, it's an ongoing relationship there that has been nothing but fruitful. And, you know, that was a huge one. So that kind of like pushed me down that road. And then I think probably the next one that I would say was the biggest breakthrough moment was when I started working with the Mark of Cain, because that was something that, oddly enough, also came through that stage of going to music school. I met John, and like through just sort of performing through there, and he'd come to see a performance one day, and I think like he saw me playing what I was, into at the time, which was a lot of odd time technical kind of shit, and he sort of went, "Oh, this is cool. Like this guy's got a similar mindset. This younger dude, half my age, but like has a similar kind of approach to music. Maybe we could work with him, because the Mark of Cain's like official drummer John Stanier is, US drumming legend. So hard for them to kind of get the guy down here and rehearse with him. So they asked me to just help them rehearse for a period of time, and eventually like the guy would come back in and do the tours and all the rest, but I'd just sort of help him. And I was like young guy, fresh out of music school, so I was like, fuck yeah, like why wouldn't I play with this massive band? And then as that rolled on, they realized that John wasn't actually available to do the tour that we were sort of working towards, their sort of comeback tour, and they needed a new drummer, and I was there. I'd done the work. I'd transcribed all their songs and like learned them all note for note, and I'd been that guy with my book in the rehearsal room telling them, actually this riff is played on the 12th fret, blah blah. They were like, oh fuck, is it? And, like I knew the stuff inside out, and they kind of recognized that. So when they were like auditioning some of like the heaviest motherfuckers in Australia, like names like Lucius Borich and stuff were getting thrown around, and I was like, well, there's no chance I'm going to keep this gig. Absolutely, like that's fine. It's been nice, guys. But then they, like, to their credit, even though they had management and whoever else being like, yeah, we should get someone with like a good rap sheet, they were like, nah, the kid's done the work. So they gave me the opportunity to go out on tour with them, and then all of a sudden, that was like all this stuff was happening. My band Life Pilot was doing some pretty cool things at the time. We were jumping on Soundwave Festival around the same time, and I had like fucking Stu Harvey on Short Fast Loud on Triple J, like talking about me specifically on the channel, like both bands and what was going on. And I was just like, man, what the fuck is happening? Yeah, because like 6 months prior, like no one knew who the fuck I was or my band or anything like that. Yeah, it was a pretty bizarre like little like cluster of moments. But from that, I mean, I've been able to, I'm still working with the Mark of Cain 10 years later. Still working with Life Pilot 10 years later, and everything's kind of grown and matured from there. So I think those two moments, like choosing to leave school, don't go the safe route, and then the path that sort of led from there, that'd be the big breakout moments for me.
Right. So we'll touch back and go, oh, sorry. Just had a phone call come through. Sorry.
All good, bro.
Yeah, so the one thing I did want to backtrack to with that is going into the decision. So obviously you're like 16 years old or 15 at the time. And it's a pretty pivotal decision, especially for someone at that age, to make the decision like, I'm dropping out of school to pursue music. It's a big risk, because if it doesn't pay off in some way or another, it can, as you said, it's not the safe route, put it that way. It's a big decision to make. What were some of the things that was going on in your head that kind of made you decide, I'm going to take the leap?
I hate my school and I don't like anyone here. And I like playing the drums. Honestly, like, I mean, you know what it's like when you're that age, like you don't think about things like that. You're so uninhibited in terms of what you want to spend your time doing. You just do the things you're obsessed with. So yeah, like for me, I just loved playing the drums. I loved being in bands. I'd been, jamming with like the two other guys in my little country town that thought the same things as me for a couple of years and played a few gigs. And I'd never had anything in my life hit me the same way that like moving air around playing music with a couple other people did. Like I can viscerally remember the first time that happened, what it felt like, and no amount of science class or whatever else ever came close to that. So for me, I've always just kind of been that guy who I tell all my friends, like, quit their job and break up with your girlfriend who you don't like or whatever else. Like, I thought that was a more recent thing, but I actually caught up with like one of my old friends from like that era recently, and he told a story about a time that I did that when we were like 12, and I was like, fuck, like that was part of my personality, like back then, like just this kind of like life's too short, just move on and do the thing that you want attitude. And I think, I attribute that to my parents. Like they both live fairly like alternative lifestyles, in the sense of like they don't, like my dad is a musician, although he's, worked like regular jobs and stuff. Like he's a very creative, like insular type, and so is my mum. She's like she's like a farmer type, sort of lives to the beat of her own drum. So that was the influence that I had around me. So I kind of didn't see anything dangerous or wrong about it. And we didn't have money growing up. So the idea of, going into a field that is like inherently terrible financially, just didn't even cross my mind, like honestly, like it was just not even a question. And honestly, at that stage, like I was already messing around with teaching. Even when I was like 16, I was like starting to teach a couple of kids in the area, just like how to play basic rock beats or whatever. And, like I had friends working part-time jobs at the local Foodland or whatever, and they were earning $12 an hour, and I could go and earn like $30 an hour teaching a kid. And I was just like, well, this is lucrative. Like, this is great. I got cash, man. Like,
this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. So you put all those things in a pot, and then you go like, what's the smart thing? Like, stay in school and work on a career. And I didn't even know what I wanted to do. Like, I was thinking about being a cabinet maker. Like, I don't fucking care about making cabinets. Although nowadays, like, I'm building walls in my studio and shit. Man, that would have been good to know.
Yeah. It comes full circle, doesn't it?
It does. It truly does. But yeah, so like, all of that together, it seems so simple to me. Like, just go and do the thing that you want to do and figure it out as you go. And I think that's just a big part of my like attitude towards life, is like, no one has the answers to everything straight away. You kind of just got to dive in a bit. So yeah, that was my whole thing. I just jumped and went for it. And my parents were super supportive about it. And the rest is history, I guess.
So what options, curiously, did you have around there? Because you said you lived in a country town. So what options did you have available for music schools?
Not many. So
yeah, that's the way I asked, because I assume it wouldn't be a plethora of them compared to like going straight into the heart of the city or something like that,
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So like I lived in a little town called Yankalilla, which obviously you're from Queensland, so I don't know how well you know rural South Australia, but
not very.
It's sort of like at least an hour and a half south of the city. And outside of that, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. Even in some of the bigger towns along the coastline there, it was pretty like spotty as far as like what was around for music. The closest thing we had was like the local TAFE, right? Which happened to have a music course. They happened to have like a diploma course. So I thought, well, that's it. Mum says I can quit, but I've got to get some sort of qualification. They do a Cert 4, which I can lead into a diploma, and maybe if I want to go to uni after that, I can do that, which I didn't end up doing. But like it just was the only option. So I guess, I didn't have to think about it. It was just like, oh, okay, we'll do that. It was far more appealing than anything else that was on the table, and it ended up being great. It was a perfect fit for me.
Because that's what I was going to ask. Going and doing a diploma course is slightly different to doing a bachelor degree and all of that. But when you did, as you said, I think it's a really funny thing where it's like you're sitting in class and like, dude, you start class next week.
Yeah.
You're like, what the hell, man? So very clearly, I could imagine in some fantasy idea of you of just literally just flipping your table, flipping the bird, and just like walking out of school literally
honestly,
at that moment.
Pretty much. I found out like so the slight like strange story, but I actually changed high schools when I thought I didn't get in. I ended up going to the school. I'd done like a small like little vet course, like a little like vocational course through another school like earlier to just dabble in music, and I was like, oh, this is it. That was part of my decision. It's like, no, this is what I want to do. So I thought, well, they actually have somewhat of a music program at this school. So if I didn't get in, if I sucked at drums and failed my audition, I'll just go here for a year and then try again next year. But all the music teachers that I had met the previous year all like changed roles, and they hired like a new lady named Miss Honda, and she hadn't met me the year before. And because it was like a late enrollment into the the school. I wasn't on any of the rolls. So like she didn't believe I was a student at the school. For the couple of weeks I was there, I'd go into music class and I'd be like, hey, Miss Honda, I'm here, year 12 music. Like, yo, what am I doing? What are my projects or whatever? And she'd just be like, no, get out. You're not part of the class. I'm like, I'm literally just here to do this. Like, can you please tell me? She's like, no. And then like, I'd have this argument with her every single week. And then I remember having that argument with her, and like, I ended up getting like one of the people from the front office to like come down and like explain to her the situation, because like she fucking just wouldn't believe, like, and I don't get it. Like, this kid keeps rocking up to a class. Like, why wouldn't you just let him do the class? And she eventually was like, oh, okay, you are part of this class. Okay, sorry, go play the drums for an hour or whatever. I was like, all right, fine. That wasn't that hard. I get home that night and I'm telling mom this like story in the car on the way home. She's like, well, you don't have to worry about that anymore because we got a call from TAFE and you're in, buddy. You start next week. And I was like, yes. Fuck you, Miss Honda.
Yeah, little victories.
Yeah, it was
little
weird.
victories.
It was kind of, and like, you know, I had like this stupid because I was like the last person to enroll that year in getting a uniform. They only had like a fucking 4XL shirt and I wore like a medium at the time. So I was the new kid wearing a fucking tent, arguing with the music teacher every day. It's like, I'm supposed to be here, please. Like, so I'm glad I didn't have to see that year out. I'm really glad I moved on, you know?
It just sounded like everything happened for the right reasons at the right time for you, man.
For real.
Yeah.
It did.
So curiously then, like, you get in, I'm guessing that week you're like, I'm not going back to school. When you kind of found that news out and you knew you had a week before you started, what was kind of going through your head at that point? Were you just like, I am so ready to go, like, let's do this, you know? What did you prepare anything in your head for like how you would kind of approach this, or?
Not really. I think I was just excited to just do something new, you know? It just felt, I don't remember being really that nervous. I mean, sure, like a little bit of just general like social anxiety of like, oh man, I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone into something new. But I think musically, like I was just excited to just put myself in that environment. I know I was like pretty nervous about music theory and things like that because that wasn't something we'd ever really touched on at school. And being a drummer, we don't use a ton of that outside of rhythmic reading. So I was a bit like, uh-oh, this could be a bit of a, you know, a whiplash moment. But yeah, I think the first day I just remember rolling in there and everyone was super nice and it was a cool vibe. And I just immediately like felt like I was in the right place, if you know what I mean. Like the people around me were like my kind of people. Even if we were all into different stuff or whatever, I wasn't surrounded by people whose, you know, life goal was to just, like be a bricklayer or whatever, which is fine, but like that wasn't my thing. So immediately I just felt like, okay, this is cool. So yeah, like there wasn't a lot going into it. And like, you know, I'm 16, I'm cocky as fuck. Like, I think I'm the shit, you know, like, I don't know. Which
I'm the best drummer in my town. Yeah.
Well, I was only the second best drummer in the town, to be honest. The other guy was also at the course with me. So, so to be honest, that sort of took the pressure off a little bit because I was like, well, I know I'm not going to be the best guy because he's got a couple of years on me and he can play bluesders and I can't. Like,
yeah. So obviously you do your diploma and all of that. And it sounded like you really kind of just immersed yourself in there and not only just in the sense of playing, but which I think is like the most, if not more important part of university is the networking and meeting fellow peers and becoming really good friends with people and work people as well that you end up working with for a long time. When you kind of got to the end of that, obviously in that period in time, it was pretty crucial and there would have been a lot of lessons you learned and it probably would have opened you up to a lot of different doors. So to the end of your degree or your diploma, I should say, what were some of the big things that factored in direction and what you would learned that kind of helped push you to where you are today?
Good question. I think the biggest thing that I took away from my time there was that you can split yourself into far too many pieces trying to be the best at everything in music, and especially in drumming, because, you know, we all like to kind of have a finger in every stylistic pie, especially in a learning environment like that, where you have to be good at blues and jazz and Afro-Cuban and blah, 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 blah. And that was great to be exposed to all those things. And that's why I loved that particular course, far more than, you know, than a lot of my peers went on to specialize and do the bachelor's through uni of jazz. And that was all cool. But like, I guess it's coming back to that pragmatic approach that I tend to have with things, where I look at it and go like, well, what's the point? You know, like, why would I stick with this, or why would I invest more time and effort and energy in this thing if it's not going to serve me? So I feel like I got a great overview of what the musical landscape in whatever it was, 2020 or God knows, I'm old now, but 2010, whatever it was. And I sort of went like, right, this is my place in it here. You know, like, I want to work in this environment, and this environment, and this environment. I'm not really worried about doing this, 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 and this. So I kind of just went like, right, I want to go be a touring drummer. I just want to get out on the road and have that experience of traveling and playing music. I don't care if it's at a low level or a high level. I just want to do that. And then, you know, I loved recording. I loved that aspect of, you know, like tinkering with things. I'm a bit of a tinkerer in general. So that appealed to me, although I was really just like getting started. I was just like, you know, here you go. Here's the basics of how it works. But I thought that's cool. And then I think, you know, the other aspects of it that I took away from it was very much, yeah, just like finding your personal identity through music, like something that I always struggled with any sort of like musical education in those larger, whether it's TAFE or uni or whatever. I think TAFE's a bit smoother with it than uni is, but they tend to sort of like box you in a little bit in terms of like who you are as a musician. You have to follow the rules, because that's what it's about. It's about teaching you a set of rules and formulas and equations that equal these styles. And, you know, they need to tick the box and say that, yeah, Eli can play, you know, a ballad. Yeah, you know, and that's cool. But I always sort of struggled with some of that, of feeling like, well, where's that identity behind it? Where's that like fire behind it? You know? And that's, I think, I thought there was just enough of that to get me through. So I finished my diploma, and that was all happy days. But I didn't want to go and do another 4 years of that and get even more boxed in. I wanted to kind of go like, all right, I feel like I've got enough tools to get myself to where I need to go, and I can build the rest from there. But I think another huge one that I took away from that was like the importance of like sight reading and rhythmic theory. Like, not that everyone has to sight read like a motherfucker, but I try to make sure that all my students at the academy at least have like a good understanding of like how to read drum music, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are great drummers who don't read. That's fine. But I just know how much that's helped me at times. Like, you know, working up for the Mark of Cain, like I had to learn like 30 songs in a pretty short amount of time, and my memory's terrible. So like I had to write them out. It's how I learned the parts. And then through the process of writing them out, I learned more about the part than if I just sat there and tried to like transcribe it from ear onto the drums.
I'm exactly the same, dude. It is, to me, the best way I think I describe it is it's like learning how to write English.
Yes.
It's like you can be very, very fluent and have like a very big, see, there you go. I can't even think of the word.
Vocabulary?
Vocabulary. Thank you.
We got this. How many drummers does it take to finish a sentence?
Yeah, it gives you a greater vocabulary to be able to speak it, but then it's another thing to be able to write it, which is a big aspect, I feel, of drumming, where it's like you don't have to be able to read like the craziest semi-quaver like part, but it's like you get the basics of learning how to read it and write it and understand what you are looking at. This is a tool that can help you learn and remember and figure things out playing wise that you might struggle with. So yeah, I just thought I would
no, you're spot on. And I find that, like, if anything, it speeds up my process of learning. Like, people go, like, oh, well, it takes ages to write that out. It's like, well, only if you're not, like, very fluent with it. If you get a bit more efficient with how to write things out, there's lots of great software out there. Like, I find that when I am trying to learn a song, if I just get on the kit and try to hack it out, I'll spend hours and still get the part wrong because I'll miss a ghost note, or there'll be something in it that I didn't realize. Whereas if I just sit down at my computer and I listen to it, I slow it down, I use all the myriad of amazing tools there are now to like figure out what the part is,
Mm.
and I put it on a page. By the time I take that finished page, which might take me 2 or 3 hours to finish, depending on the difficulty of the song, and I take it over to the drum kit, I've already learned like 60% of that song in the process of writing it out. Because of course, like we understand like, oh, boom, tick, gap, boom, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's how, and that's that shape going down. You're already learning it. So by the time you get on the kit, you're halfway there. So it's not wasted time. It's like, if anything, it's more efficient because you've already done some of the work and then you've got this aid to make sure that you're playing everything correctly from the get-go. So you're not like building in bad muscle memory. You're not like practicing the wrong version of a groove for 4 hours and then going, oh, wait, a ghost note. And then you got to build it all again from scratch.
Yeah. And the other thing too that it's useful is like, say you don't touch that material for a good couple of years.
Yeah.
And you go back to revisit and you're like, oh crap, I got to do this again. Whereas for me, like all of the tracks that I've ever done, I've still got those notations if there is ever a day that I have to go back and replay them. So it's also like you're giving your future you tools to be able to get better at what you do with it, man. Yeah.
Absolutely. I took a lesson with Jeff Friedel from A Perfect Circle and Pussifer at some point, and we talked about that, and he was like, I was already sort of doing these things, but he was like, yeah, dude, in my life, like everything he's got it's all handwritten too, which is wild. And yeah, he was like, that's it. Like I've got like pages and pages and folders and desk drawers full of this shit. Because if some artist I worked with 3 years ago calls me for a fill-in date tomorrow, I can be across the material and I can say yes to that gig and not be stressing out about getting over it again because I've done it. Past me is given me a way out. And I've had it like happen to me on tour with the Mark of Cain, like, early-ish on in that. We'd done a couple tours together, but they wanted to play this song that we hadn't done in ages and had this really complicated part in the middle that I don't know if I ever fully like had. I could do it, but it was like, when you sort of rent the car as opposed to buying it,
Yeah.
So they were like, yeah, let's do that. We hadn't rehearsed it. And I was like, well, fuck, like, hang on a minute. And I traveled with the charts. This was before like, Dropbox was a handy thing or whatever. So I had like printed out charts of everything in my pedal case on tour. And I remember like in the green room right before we went on stage, I've got my in-ears in, I got the Spotify up and I'm like, right, left kick, left kick, left kick. And they're like, you good to go? I'm like, leave me alone, I will be. But then by the time like we got out on stage, like, when that part of the set came up, I kind of just shut my eyes and I could literally see the chart in my head. And it was like sight reading off of my brain. And if I hadn't had that skill, I would have to say, no, guys, we can't do that song. I'm a big weenie and I don't remember it. Like, but really, that's the sort of thing. Is like when you're working with a band, like they've got their shit together. Like, you need to be flexible. You need to be able to roll with the punches and not be that like stick in the mud who's like, no, we're only going to play what we said. Like it allows you to be able to be a bit more flexible, easier to work with. You can trust yourself because you've done the work in the past, and it just opens up more potential good times. And it was fun. It was fun to do something that was a little bit like on the knife's edge,
It changes up because sometimes your live set, especially when you go on tour and you're playing the same thing night out and night out, sometimes you just have a little change in the set every now and again. It's just a great way to give it that breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like you're not going through the motions, which can happen at some points, So,
or if you've just got like a manager who likes to make changes to the set list like halfway through the tour. That one's a thing.
Good old management. Good old management.
That's a separate podcast.
Yes, I agree. But yeah, so that's some really interesting kind of lessons. I feel like it sounds like you took with you, still to this day, are taking with you some of those things that you kind of learned going through that diploma course. So what happens then when you finish it and you kind of go, okay, I'm done? Did you have things going on at uni that carried over after that, or did you kind of finish and you're like, okay, I've got these tools, now it's time to inject myself in the scene? Or were you kind of doing that at the same time of your diploma course?
I was already playing. I think that was a huge part of it. It was like, if you're studying, you should be out there doing it. That was where everyone in that course was growing the most. Yeah, I had a couple of bands going at the time. I was playing in 2 bands and working for an artist on the side. So there were like 3 things going, and it ended up being that like one of the bands, which was like with a bunch of friends from like, you know, my childhood, that ended up sort of falling apart. That was like a whole fiasco.
Mm,
Um, so as I sort of finished that course, I've just lost a huge like part of my musical identity, if you will, because I was like
mm,
one of the main writers in that band. It was the first band that I'd really contributed a lot to, not just on drums, but like everything else.
mm,
So that was a real like hit to my psyche and confidence. So I was kind of like, man, I've just finished this course. I've just put all my eggs in this basket. Like, sure, I've got these other things going on, but like both of those projects are very in their infancy. You know, and I've just lost the big one that was sort of my priority band, and that's not going all very well. And what do I do? So you know, I wasn't looking to go and do any more study. I'd already sort of figured out that wasn't for me, but I was a little bit shaken as to whether I'd made the right choice. Because I
mm,
think as soon as you get out of that, I'm 16, 17, I'm invincible. And then all of a sudden you're 21, 22, you're living out of home, you're fucking paying rent, you know, the crushing
mhm,
reality of the world starts kicking in and you go a bit
mm.
like, uh-oh, maybe those idiots in that country town weren't far off the mark saying that music's a bit hard.
Yeah.
Um, but I never wanted to stop doing it. There was never a time where I was like, let's throw it all in and
Mm,
be it whatever else.
mm,
So I think the answer was that I just went like, all right, well, I'll pour all that energy into the other projects that I've got going on. And then pretty soon after, the Mark of Cain thing actually ended up coming in and taking that place. So that was like, they were the holy trinity there for a while of projects.
mm,
Um, and that yeah, like I rode those for quite a few years as sort of my main things, doing things on the side. That's when a lot
mm,
of that MD work started kicking in.
mm,
But yeah, I think that was sort of it. Like I had that initial like kick in the guts, like, oh God, what have I done? But then I was like, right, back in the scene, let's go. Like I
mm,
just love playing music. It's all I know how to do at this point.
mhm,
So instead of worrying about like coming up with a backup plan, which I know a lot of people who were like studying with me were also talking about during like the end part of our time at, you know, at the music course, was like, right, well, do I go do a physio degree or something like that so I can go and earn money and
mm,
do music on the side? And I was like, well, what's the point in doing that? Like, you're going to spend all this money, time, and energy building something else so you can still do the thing that you want to do. Just put all that
mm,
money, time, energy into this, and hopefully it will grow. Like, it's a gamble, sure, but like,
mm.
you know, if you've got the tools and you do it right, it shouldn't be any less of a gamble than anything else, or any more, I
Yeah.
should say.
No, 100%. And I kind of feel like a lot of people do that. And I kind of feel if you give yourself the option to have a backup,
Mm.
9 times out of 10, you're going to go to that
Yeah.
eventually at some point. Whereas,
Yep.
and I feel you have to put yourself in, if you really want it to pay off, you don't have a backup because
Mm.
failure isn't an option then,
I
you know?
completely agree. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we think very similarly in that aspect for sure. And I've got to ask too, because you did briefly touch on the crushing realities of the real world. That
Which
does kick
I
in.
feel on a daily basis.
Yes. But the thing is now we've done it for a lot longer. But I
Yeah.
even remember my point in time where that kind of punched me in the face a little bit hard.
Mm.
And I've got to ask, during this period in time in your diploma, because you know, as you said, it didn't seem like it was too long a period of time between when you finished and then the Mark of Cain thing kind of came. So
Yeah.
I've got a kind of like a two-parter question, but first of all, what was like a daily routine for you in the sense of like, did you have a day job? Or was playing music the thing that was paying the bills at the time? And what were your personal goals? If you
Mm.
had any for that matter too at the time, in a sense of like, was there a particular aspect of your drumming that you were working on, or was there like this dream vision of like, I want to be the biggest clinician or this or that or blah, blah, blah? Did you have anything specific that you had in mind that you were working towards too?
Um. Hmm. So sorry, what was the first part again? I just got lost on the
Okay, so
second.
first part is sorry, yeah, okay. I'll split up into the first one. So the first one is like, what was your daily routine like
Right.
in the sense
Gotcha.
of like
Yeah.
the real world? How did you manage to survive? And I use the word survive because when you are that age, it is
Yeah.
it's
That's what it is.
survival.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'm sort of proud, question mark, to say I've never had a real job.
Right, right.
Well, other than like, you know, you're 16 and you're picking grapes off of a grapevine, you know, like for a month over summer or something. But like,
you want fries with that?
yeah, that sort of thing. But no, like I like I touched on earlier, like even as a teenager, I was like, yeah, I could just like sling a couple of drum lessons and make enough pocket money to kind of get by, and that's sort of how I put myself through, you know, my diploma. I was doing a bit of that throughout it. You know, fortunate enough to be living at home and like, you know, obviously not a lot of bills and stuff, but yeah, like moving out, getting that independence, you know, sure, living with a couple other people, but like still having to pay bills and have all that responsibility. It was actually teaching. It was my main thing. I wasn't doing a ton of it, but thankfully, you know, like we were sort of saying, like you can earn a bit more per hour like teaching than you can, you know, stacking shelves or whatever. So it was a good flexible fit for me. You know, I could teach 10 or 15 lessons or whatever throughout the week. I could do it out of home because I was living with musicians. They didn't really care. That was enough to kind of just like keep things rolling on. And then obviously, gigs and whatever else, sessions like that, you know, in Adelaide, it's a small town. There's not a ton of that stuff going on, especially if you're just starting out. But there was enough where those two things combined to do it. I did work for a period, like maybe like a year or two, in like a production house doing like music videos for bands because, it just worked out that was like a better fit for the time. An opportunity came up to do it. And I thought, all right, well, that'll be cool. And, you know, when I was touring a lot, I was touring with like 3 or 4 different artists, like just bouncing between. I think the longest I spent at home where I wasn't like jetting off interstate somewhere in that 2-year period was like 3 weeks. It was like bang, 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 bang. And that was good because like I could, you know, it was like essentially freelance work. I could kind of just like, you know, put together some stuff in between like fly dates or trips away or whatever. But after a period of that, like I had to give away teaching during that. And I kind of just got to a point, especially after I went to the States and like studied with a bunch of the heavy hitters over there and kind of like learned how to play the drums correctly. I was like, okay, I need to give back. And that's when I got back into it. So teaching's always been there. It's always been that thing that's kind of like helped keep me afloat. It's something I know how to do. It's been a good backup plan, if you will. But I think the thing is that I recognized when I stepped into, you know, video production was that like as great as that was, it was taking time away from my instrument. You know, like even when I'm teaching, like I'm still learning about what I'm doing. I'm still surrounded by the things that I love. You know, if I'm teaching someone their first rock beat, but like they just happen to like ask a really good question, I go, fuck, I've never thought about it like this. And then I'll take myself back to, and it'll just like change the way I think about everything. And I learned so much from those things. And to give that away, to have a little bit more flexibility or a better salary or whatever, I was just like, nah, this is like, for me, it was like less about how much money am I earning and more about like, am I happy doing this? So long-winded, but yeah, it's always been teaching in the back.
It sounds like the big thing that I notice with a lot of people that want to get to a moment where they can feel like they've got real success, and the amount of people and drummers that even outside of this podcast that I talk to like quite regularly, the one thing, and it's very apparent with yourself as well, is not just relying on playing and thinking that playing is the thing that's going to get you through to where you've got to go. You know, and it's not saying that because of that you shouldn't focus on that. It's such a huge aspect of what you do. But the big thing, even from yourself, is it's like I had teaching. I dipped my finger into this and this and this and this. And it's like, I think the definition of successful and like professional musician now, the definition is no longer I just play shows every day 24/7, unless you are those big heavy hitters like Dennis Chambers and Tony Royster Jr. and all those kind of guys. But the big thing I have noticed, at least anyway, is that everyone has their finger in several different aspects. Like when you say someone that's not in the industry, they go, oh, you must just play shows 7 days a week. And it's like, well, no, I teach 3 or 4 days a week. I might be on tour for a good couple of weeks, and then I'll have a week off, and then I'll be back. Then on top of my teaching too, I work out of a studio. I do engineering work. So it's like all these different aspects that kind of built it together. So I feel like the definition of being a modern drummer now, I feel, is very different to where it was even 10, 20, 30 years ago, you know? So
massively.
And I feel like that's a big thing for yourself, which I would assume you would agree with that. I think would be a good contributing factor to getting where you are today is to not just, I'm just going to focus on my playing and this is it, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a very like narrow approach to anything. I mean, in any field,
Mm,
like if you are only going to specialize in one thing, like you would actually have to be one of the best at that thing
mm,
to actually like warrant all of that extra effort. I mean, think about like how long it takes to get okay at something versus how long it takes to get like amazing at something. Like
mm,
the okayness will kick in, you know, halfway along there. And then from okay to incredible is like this incredible like upward struggle. Now, I'm not saying don't strive for perfection, but it's an unrealistic dream because no matter how good you are, you're always going to be like, oh man, like that I could be that, or I could be this guy, or this person over here is doing a cool thing, or what if I tried this? That will always be there. That's your life study, right?
mm,
So if you only ever focus on that, you've got a very narrow window of things that you can monetize. You've got a very narrow window of things that you can do for your own fulfillment. You've got a very narrow experience of what that industry might be like.
mm.
So and you sort of touched on it, like to be a drummer or even a musician in 2023, like holy crap, like you got to be your own publicist, you have to be your own content
Mhm.
creator, you have to be your own like fucking manager and booking
Yep.
agent, like you have to do everything. Like the fact that there's a music industry is a fucking joke now because
Yeah.
what is everyone else doing? Like they're all taking 10-20% of what we're doing, but we're
Mm,
having to do all the work still, you know, like
mhm,
unless you're a big name artist who actually like has a team that actually does things. If
mm,
you're, you know, in the first fucking even 5 to 10 years of a project, you're going to be doing the lion's share of everything. So you
yep.
kind of need to develop these skills. And like that whole thing with video production, the only reason that came about was because I dabbled in it for so long doing band stuff, being like, oh, we need a
Mm,
music video. Oh, we need promos. Oh, blah, 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 blah. So I've always had this like opportunistic approach to, you know, where my next paycheck, if you will, is going to come from. And it's always piecemeal. It's like, well, I might, you know, teach 4 or 5 lessons this week and I might do a couple of transcriptions for someone and I might do a quick session, which
mm,
maybe it's for a mate and they'll give me $50 and lunch, but hey, I don't have to pay for lunch one day. And then, you know, yeah, like I'll go and tune up someone's drum kit. I'll do a teching set, you know, like, so you end
mm,
up with like 15 aspects that you have to, you know, kind of be across, but each one of those is pulling in a little bit and that makes up the larger whole.
mm,
Whereas, yeah, like if I was like, I'm going to be a session drummer and just play the drums on people's records every day,
mm,
like, holy shit. Like trying to do that in Adelaide, like trying to do that anywhere in the world is hard because you're immediately
mm,
competing with fucking Aaron Sterling and like all these guys just like they've got the gigs. Like you think
mm.
you're gonna take down Josh Freese? Like what are you talking about?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly,
these guys
exactly.
have got the gigs. They've got it stitched up until they die. There's not going to be like a hole in the industry for you, you know?
Yeah.
So it's better to like, you know, kind of come up with your own version of that and you find your niche within that, you know? Like
Mm,
I never anticipated that my teaching would like come to this degree. Even a couple of years
mm,
ago, I was like, yeah, whatever, it's just a side thing because I'm a touring drummer. But then
mm.
touring went away for 2 years and I went, oh fuck, like maybe I'm not a touring drummer because my bills are still getting paid because I'm teaching 4 days out of the week, you know?
Mm, mm.
So
And
you kind of end up redefining.
I think you touched on something that I had one of my old percussion teachers tell me this, and it was when I stopped going to university and I bumped into her a few years later, and she said this line that kind of really revolutionized, in my opinion, the way that I look at things. And she said, it's just like, so in your industry and what you do, because she is one of the best classical percussionists, period, like to this day still.
Wow.
But she said to me, she was asking, she was like, so in your field of work doing at that point in time metal drumming, she's just like, do you have to make your own work? Do you have to create opportunities for yourself? And I was like, holy crap. And it completely kind of took me by surprise.
Yeah.
And as you were saying, like when you've got these bigger dudes out there that they're the guys that get the session gigs, would you find, because you've done a lot of session work yourself over the years, and you've done some pretty awesome and pretty big gigs, if you don't mind me saying myself,
Thank you so
um
much.
the one thing that I would be curious to go into that aspect of it is, did you find that you had to create work for yourself? Did you have
Yeah,
to open up that door for yourself?
absolutely. Yeah, you like no one will just give you an opportunity like that. that idea of like, oh, I'm just going to go and play some shows or post on Instagram and something will fucking come out of it. Like, no, like that's not, you actually have to put wheels to the ground and do your own stuff. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like whether it's just going and actively networking with people, that's one thing, you know, no one likes doing that. That sucks, but it is part of anything, you know, or whether you are just like really pushing something like actively just like hammering, like, you know, for example, a good example of this would be when I went from just casually teaching a bit on the side in around touring work to then around like 2015, 16, I was like, I'm going to go and be a proper teacher. I'm going to like set up a business and I'm going to teach out of a drum shop and I'm going to do this whole thing. I had to change the perception of me as a drummer in the local community from just the guy who plays for X amount of bands to guy who knows what he's talking about and I can go to for professional advice. Because no one cares about taking lessons with guy from X band unless they love X band and want to learn those songs. So, you know, sure, I had like 4 people who liked the Mark of Cain who were like, tell me how to play Point Man. And I was like, well, sure, but that's not going to pay the rent, right? So I had to like completely not rebrand, but restructure that attitude of things. And this is like, I get a lot of people like asking me about like, you know, how do I build my teaching business, blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, like, what do people know you as now? You know, if they know you as a player around town, cool, that's good. You've got a reputation, but now you need to tweak that. You need to like have people kind of see you as this. So you have to make that opportunity. You have to have people see you in that light of like, oh, when I need, like, if put it this way, like if you're sitting there at home and you're playing your paradiddles and you go like, these suck, like, I need someone to help me do that. And then your brain goes that next jump, who do I know that does that? And you've just seen fucking 5 posts from, you know, whoever about, oh, let me fix your paradiddles. You're going to go see that person, right? It's just going to come to you. So, you know, I guess that's just like branding and advertising and marketing and all that, isn't it? But
which is an art form in itself.
Yeah, and I know nothing about it, but I just know how to go like, hey, I do this thing. Come and hang out with me. Like, look, I've got a giant neon sign.
It's kind of the guy that shouts the loudest on Instagram with the prettiest colors.
That's me.
Exactly. But hey, man, I feel like that's a really interesting point too, is people, I think, find it hard to get out of their own perception of who they are as a person.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you do need to go to an outsider source, whether it be a really big, heavy hitting guy from the scene, or whether it's even just to your family or friends or your peers, and be like, what do you know me as? And actually having the balls after a show or during the show to be like, what do you actually think I do? Curiously, and hear their opinion. And then when you hear it, it's like, it's pretty interesting and it's a pretty humbling experience, I think, in a lot of ways. You know, because when you do get that feedback back, you kind of go, okay, so this is how I'm perceived. Yeah. Which I feel deserves some time and thought, but it shouldn't consume you and be all encompassing at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's with that. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a brilliant piece of advice, because I've literally just been going through this 6 months of building up students again. Yeah. Because, you know, I've taught on and off through after school schools and doing it privately. I've done it for years. So I'm back in that boat again of, I have to explain to people, I like, as much as I do a lot of touring and session work and stuff, I do lessons, like, come talk to me, come see me, you know? So I think it's putting yourself out there. You have to. It's pure. Like your people aren't just going to rock up to your door and expect to, you can't just expect them to be like, oh, we heard you were a really good teacher, when you've never put it out there before, you know? That's exactly right. Yeah. You have to have something to back it up, you know, like, okay, if you're a teacher who's like at like a school or an academy or something like that, that has its own reputation, that's one thing, but you're not generating that work. The reputation of whatever your establishment you're a part of is. So, you know, if you're a teacher working in a drum shop, you're only getting students because the drum shop is going, oh, we have an educator right there you can just jump in for a lesson with, right? So, you know, that can be a great starting point, because then you get 20 or so clients that you like use to then, you know, they'll spread the word about, oh, I'm getting lessons with this guy and he's fucking fantastic, and, you know, he's got a great sign and all this sort of stuff. As you can tell, the sign is a bit of a meme around this. Yeah. I noticed it's just perfectly placed, right? Oh, yeah. I'm not stupid. Spent a lot of money on that sign, right? Like, oh, man. You know. I don't even have a sign. I want to
You gotta
sign.
get a sign, bro. It's 2023. You ain't shit if you ain't got a sign. That's
Yeah, you've sold me. I'm gonna literally look at it. I'll ask you afterwards. Hey, man, where'd you get your sign, bro?
I'll tell you. Wait for the Black Friday sales though. Let me tell you, they're not cheap.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I agree. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to get out there and push your own wagon uphill, so to speak, because
Mm.
no one's going to come to you unless they think of you in that way first. You know.
Yeah, 100%. So curiously, then you have touched on the Mark of Cain stuff, and you know, you said you were on off touring with all that kind of stuff. You did get to go over to the States, and you were doing like whole bunch of like radical opportunities came your way pretty quickly. And for someone that's just come out of a diploma, and then you did audition, as you said, and I've got two questions that I would love to ask for that. The first one is, how did you go on your audition day? What went through your head, and what did you do to prepare for that audition?
So for the Mark of Cain?
Yes.
Well, that's the interesting thing is I didn't audition in the sense of here's a date, we're going to trial you on the stuff. I was sort of, okay, so there's a bit more information required here.
Sure.
The band had taken like close to a 10-year hiatus while they were working on a record, and John was going through some like health stuff and all the rest. And then I came into the picture and they just asked me if I could help them kind of blow the rust off, you know? So I was just like the helper on the side. And then that evolved into a pretty regular thing because they were like, all right, well, we're going to book dates for this album tour. We're releasing the album, blah, blah, blah. And then that evolved into, okay, our drummer actually can't make it now. We need to look for a guy. And by that stage, I was already 30 songs in. I was jamming with the guys on a weekly, fortnightly basis. You know, it was cool. Everyone was easy to work with each other. Like they were trusting me with parts because they knew I was doing my homework, but they also knew that I was someone that was like happy to like take criticism. Like my attitude with this whole thing is that band had been a band for like 30 years before like, so, you know, I'm not even as like, we literally did an anniversary tour of their first record a couple of years ago, right before COVID. It was 30 and I was 29. So that gives you like
perspective.
Right. So I'm not going into that and being like, let me show you how to play the songs, old dudes. I'm going in going like, is this okay? Am I doing all right? So when they were like, yeah, this is great, music school kid, but don't play it so rigid. Relax it a bit. It's punk rock. It's this. Little micro pauses here, things that don't actually make musical sense, but just go with it. I'll be like, all right, cool. Like, and they'll go, oh, great. We don't have to fight this guy for anything. Not only is he playing everything the way it's supposed to go, but we can make edits to it, and it's cool. And that's something I've always tried to be with, like, playing music for clients, whether it's like band work, solo artist work. Just be flexible. So by the time that the conversation around, do we get Lucius Borich or someone insane like that, like I was already ahead of the pack. You know, they already had a guy who was doing a good job. So, you know, it wasn't a level playing field in any way. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I beat those guys out. I had 2 months head start, motherfucker. But at the same time, like they still had to kind of like compare those people's bodies of work and like what I was bringing to the table and go like, no, this is the right fit. So it wasn't a formal, like, we're going to sit you down and audition, but it was very much a like, okay, well, you've presented enough of a body of work for us to trust that. And, you know, there was still the phone call of like, g'day, you know, I remember getting the voicemail, g'day, this is John. We've had a conversation. We've decided to offer you the place of the touring drummer, blah, blah, blah. Like it was a whole thing that, you know, it wasn't just like, you'll be right. It was like there was a decision that had to be made.
There was still a process.
Yeah. It's just that I didn't have that formal like, all right, we'll get you in on Tuesday, October 4th, and we'll play these 4 songs and we'll talk about this and blah, blah, blah. It was like, yeah, you've kind of already done the trial by fire already.
Yeah. And it sounded like even though they could have gotten these bigger, heavy hitter dudes in, as you said, it seemed like more of a right fit to have someone that had spent a couple of months not only getting to know them, but getting to know their works, how their touring works, and all of that kind of stuff, you know, which, as you said, does give you a severe advantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And also, I think it was a matching of attitudes because, like, I remember when they were talking to some of these players, I don't remember exactly who, but you know, they would sort of talk about it at band practice. And they're obviously very comfortable around me because I'm like just talking about, oh, this guy said this and blah, 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 and what an idiot. And I was like, whoa, okay, righto. But a couple of the players had sort of had this approach of like, oh, yeah, I've listened to the songs and this one's pretty cool. I can just jam through that. And that sort of put them on a bit of a back foot because they were like, well, our songs actually aren't simple. Even though they're like written a little rudimentary, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Like even to this day, like we're working on some material for the next tour that we're going to do, some songs I haven't worked with before. And I'm sitting there going like, what the fuck? How can you make a rock beat so difficult with what's happening around it? But there's all these like tiny little things. So they were kind of like, yeah, you can do that, but we've had 15 other drummers before who've done that and none of those worked. The ones that do work are the ones that go, this is how it is. Like it's a very like engineered machine-like structure, that band. So I think that was the thing that really tipped me over the edge with them, was that like I went in not trying to reinvent the machine or to force my way of playing on it, but instead fit in with what worked, you know? So I think in a sense, not having that ego or that reputation or that body of work behind me to be like, well, I'm this guy and I'm going to play it the way I play it. Instead, it was like, well, how do you want me to play it? Like, I'm an open book. And I think, you know, some players get caught in that thing of like, this is me as a musician. And I think that's important to have an identity, but you can have a fucking identity playing whatever you want. Like, don't be so fragile to think that your identity is based around like playing flammed triplet fills. Like, who cares, right? Like, have an identity in other ways, you know?
Yeah, I think it's more have a broader stroke identity.
Agreed. Yeah.
Without shitting on anyone when I say that. But
no,
yes,
of course not. Of course not.
I know people that are exactly like that. So
yeah,
you know, and that's fine. So I've got a couple. The other thing that I did want to ask too is that when you did get into that position, you did finally you got the voicemail, you heard it. Yep, you've got the gig. Mentally, obviously, you know from that point like shit's about to change. You know, things are about to change in a way that I you know, I've looked back at some of the things that I've done. Is like I had no idea what I was in for until I got into the thick of it. So when you got that call between your first show to knowing that you'd actually gotten in, what happened in that period of time? Was it just like vigorous preparation as much as possible? Were you like training yourself mentally? What was going on in that period in time so that when you set foot on stage with them for the first time as their guy, what did you do to make sure that was the best for you?
Yeah, it was just a lot of practice, a lot of practice. At the like, yeah. So when I got the call, which I think would have been, let's say, loosely January, and then the first show was near the start of March. That was 3 months of just like relentless rehearsals. I think we were doing 2 to 3 times a week with the band, and then you know, myself every day, like just every single fucking day, because I had dabbled with touring a little bit here and there, weekend shows here and there, and a couple of stringing togethers, but I'd never done, you know, a full like Australian run. Certainly never played any of these sizes of venues. I'd done a couple of shows at bigger venues, but like they were either one-offs or a different genre. So it's a very different thing.
Yeah.
So I was sort of like, like it was all unknown to me, you know? I kind of knew what it was going to be like from an audience perspective, because like I'd been to shows of that level at these venues and, you know, that sort of style. So I knew what I was going to be putting out there. But I think the big thing for me is that like I knew that, and I could see it on the Facebook comments when they announced it, you know, people were like, oh, no John Stanier. Damn.
Yeah.
Which, fair enough. I fucking love John Stanier. I think he's one of the most underrated rock drummers there is.
Agreed.
Fucking unreal.
Yeah.
I like, you know, in music school, before I even met the Mark of Cain guys, I was like trying to learn all the parts off that Battles album, that first one, the EP or album, that one with Atlas and Tonto and all. I was like, how the fuck is, like, I was doing it. And then I meet these guys and they're like, by the way, John Stanier is our drummer. I was like, what? Yeah, I'm gonna fill in that for that guy? What do you mean? So like I knew I had massive shoes to fill, and I knew that the fans of this band were really passionate. So I was just like, well, don't fuck up, man. Just play perfect every night. And we all know how hard that is. So it was just like, if I got to go out there and play, and they play long sets too. If we're playing for 2 hours every night and I have to like be perfect. I also have to bring the right energy to it. John's a really intense drummer. So it was just like, I was just trying to get in that dude's skin. I was literally just like 4 hours, 5 hours a day going over the material, stop, take a break, do a few more, it sucked. It was, but I felt really confident in my drumming going into that. I was nervous as hell for that first show, but it was a hometown show. It was at Adelaide at the old HQ there. And what was kind of cool was that like the week or so prior to that, maybe a couple of weeks prior to that, they shot a music video at the same venue, right? They hired it out, and Stanier was actually down. It was the only time I've actually got a chance to meet the guy. He was down for Soundwave Festival. So he shot the music video with him, and I just went in there and just watched and like met the dude, and he was like, "Did you really transcribe all my shit?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was just kind of like, "Huh," and walked away. That's it. That's the only interaction I've had with the dude. It was pretty funny. But yeah, so like, but I got to watch it from the audience's perspective. So I was there watching the band that I'm going to be playing in 2 weeks' time on the stage, and I was like, okay, I can do this. I can be that guy, right? It was actually a really good like motivational moment, but it was also a little scary because I was like, fuck, like, I've got to be that guy. Oh God.
Yeah. There's like, I can be that guy, but I have to be that guy.
Exactly. Yeah, I can, but I got to, and I don't know if those two things are going to happen at the same time. But that first show was amazing. Like it was really like, that was a life-changing experience, I think, because up to that point it was a pipe dream, and I guess I kind of felt like at any point they would go, actually no, John can do the tour, it's all good, which I would have been fine with, because like fuck yeah, like take that guy on tour, hell yeah. But yeah, it wasn't until we were actually out there on the road and I was like, oh damn, like okay, we're doing this,
Yeah, mad.
So
mad.
yeah,
damn. So from then you did quite a few series of tours with them, and as you said, you're prepping for another one soon that's coming up. In that period in time of the touring, because as you said, you weren't really a seasoned touring drummer at that point, and now you are. So being now and reflecting back on all of these tours and all these things that you've done, what was one of the biggest things you learned about being a touring drummer that has really helped shape you to become the touring drummer that you are now?
It's all in the preparation, and it's all in, especially for that style of music, maintaining your level of playing going into it. So it's not enough to be like, I can play the music, I feel comfortable with it, we know what the set is, blah, blah, blah. But like, you've got to simulate the environment that you're going to be working in before you get there. So like playing in an uncomfortable environment, playing with lots of people watching, playing for like a long period of time if you're playing longer sets, playing at the intensity that you're going to be playing live. Like we all know, especially as rock metal drummers, like, what you play in like at rehearsal versus what you do at the gig is completely different, So, that's a huge part of it. And like my hands, like especially back then, this is before I worked on my technique, which was a whole like overhaul I had to do for like 6 months after, realizing I wasn't doing things correctly. I was like hands covered in blisters. That was probably the biggest one. Was I was like, I'm doing something wrong here if I'm coming off stage and I've got 5 blisters on my hand and I got to play 2 more shows this weekend and then 3 more the next. And you know what I mean? Like night after night after night after night. I'm just like, I remember at the end of that first tour, I was practically wearing gloves of finger tape. It was disgusting.
Right.
And I would get to the hotel after the show and like pull the tape off and just re-rip the blister. And I like that first moment, like dunking my hands in the shower after the show, it was just like pure agony. That was, I was like, this can't continue. So after a few more runs with them, I had the opportunity to go to the States and like study with Dave Elich and Billy Reimer and a few other guys that were like a bit more technique focused. And they were like, you can play the drums, you don't know how to hit a drum. And I was like, well, that's important information to know. Very good. Glad I've been doing this for fucking 20 years. Sick. But then it was like overhaul hands, and then the next run from that point on, I like blister free. Now I can go on tour with them. I even went on tour with a broken thumb a couple of years ago. Like I fucking snapped my thumb backwards right before we went on that same, like I was 29 when we were doing the 30th anniversary tour. Broken right thumb, thanks to my bass player slapping me in the hand. And it was like, well, okay, but because I'd worked with the technique, we got through. We were fine, it sucked, but we were fine. So I think that the big takeaway that I had from that first tour that like informed the rest of it was like, you need to be smart about it. You need to have your body in the right condition. You need to be playing, if you're going to play 2 hours a night, you need to play 4 hours a day leading up to that. Or else you're going to get your ass kicked by the time the adrenaline starts pumping. You have a bad sleep. The plane flight sucked. Your hotel's shit. You're stressed, whatever. The singer's in a bad mood and it's bringing the vibe down, whatever. All of those things add up. You got bad sound on the night, all those things. That adds to it. So if you're only conditioned to play the bare minimum and then you add all that, you're fucked. If you are conditioned to do double the amount of work, and then all that stuff adds on, but you only have to do half the amount, you're good. You've got headroom. You can grow into that. You can play, you can have fun, you can be free to express yourself as an artist and enjoy the experience instead of stressing out the whole time or fucking it up, more importantly.
Yeah. Because I feel it's the big overload, because especially it's like, it's 90% of being on tour is hurry up and wait. For an hour to an hour and a half's worth of work, depending on who you're playing with and what you're doing. So it's that hurry up and wait can get tedious, it can get monotonous, it can get exhausting. Plus then the travel added to it too, which then you're not in your usual environment, you can get sick. There's so many factors to it, and it's like, first of all, if you're not in shape in some way or another, you're going to burn out. But it's an interesting thing that you did say, is that it's like, if you double the workload that you expect to be doing, then at least if you still are only doing this, you're used to doing this. You have that breathing space to relax and do all of that. So I think that's a really interesting way of kind of putting that. So now coming to a point of where you are now, clearly we are both endorsed by Dream Cymbals.
Yay, Dream.
Come to that, but go Dream. Holla,
the Dream Team, baby.
Shout out to Ed and Craig and the amazing team at Dream. The thing of where you are now, that's the last thing I did want to touch on. And as we are both endorsed by the same people, but I feel everyone's journey towards endorsements is very different in how they get to it. So curiously for yourself, you had Mark of Cain that was going on. First of all, how long have you been endorsed with Dream Cymbals now?
A long time. I think I did the maths at some point when they turned 10, which was a few years ago now. I think I realized I'd been with them for about 6 or 7 years at that point. So I was pretty early on in the piece as far as like when they came to Australia. I don't know if I was the first Australian artist, but I can't have been far from it. Because so my story as to how I got into Dream, not to make this the Dream podcast.
No,
but,
sure.
You should all buy their cymbals. They're the best. Yeah.
Let me lift the curtain. I'll show you.
That's
show you
right.
my stash.
Look at all this. We have the 22-inch Energy Ride over here. No, I started working with like using their cymbals when I was in music. Coming back to that whole thing of like, I don't have money. I'm just figuring this thing out. I'm there with my, like, I play in a hardcore band cymbals, and I didn't have the gear that I needed to play jazz, like everyone's bringing their cymbals in to practice on the kits we had at the studio at school. And like, they've got their Ks and their shit. And I was like, what about this like Mega Bell ride or like this fucking ridiculous, just Z custom crap, right?
Yeah.
So it was like completely inappropriate, sound edge hi-hats and all this sort of stuff, trying to play like a halftime shuffle, like, nah, not happening. So I was like, I need something more versatile, but I didn't have the money. I'm a broke student, right? So I remember, do you remember the Pearl Drummers Forum?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Man. Like that's education right there.
Oh yeah, that's going back to an era which I feel at some point deserves just this entire episode of that era when the internet got big enough, where you had what was it, the Drummer World, where it would have the list of drummers and you could go and check it, all
their videos and
the forum as well.
Fuck yeah.
It's such a niche era that is so accredited to a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, so many people like either met each other as a result. Like, I've still got connections that I met on the Pearl Drummers Forum. Like, it's bizarre.
Yeah, right.
Like a dude I had on Facebook at one point, like recently, I was like, how the fuck do I know this guy? Like what? And then like, I kind of like, you know, I went back through his feed. I'm like, oh, it's so-and-so from the Pearl Drummers Forum that I talked to when I was like 17. Like, what the fuck? You know? It's crazy. Anyway, so I was on the PDF back in the day, and I was like, yeah, I'm broke. How do I get good cymbals? And this was around the time that, you know, we started seeing a lot of like custom cymbal companies. We had like the Saluters and all that sort of stuff coming into it. And someone was like, I saw these cymbals at my local shop in Canada or whatever. They're called Dreams. They were really cheap, but they sounded amazing. See if you can find some of them. And I can't remember how much they said they like paid for it, but I did the math. I was like, what the fuck? Like, that's crazy if these things are legit. So this is like pre-mycymbal.com or any of those like first big online cymbal retailers. Get this cymbal at mycymbal.com. It was, I forget what it was called, but there was this shady motherfucking website with like a video, like a 144p video of each cymbal recorded with what I can only imagine was like a trash can of just like hitting this cymbal, and it was like, yeah, Dream Bliss, blah blah blah, and these were prototypes. It was I remember buying the 19-inch Dream Bliss prototype crash ride and a 20-inch Dream Bliss prototype ride, and this must have been like within the first year of them being out there as a company. So I was like, I don't know if this video is really up to scratch. Like, I hope they sound okay. But the price was good. They were new. You know, obviously Dream stuff is made in China, so they're able to kind of like keep the price a little bit more affordable. So I was like, well, let's give it a go. And I remember they came in, and when I hit them, I've had this feeling twice in my life. Once when I got these cymbals, and once when I managed to score a $4,000 vintage like Sonor snare from Cash Converters for $200. I felt like I had stolen something. I hit it and went, what do you mean? Like, this is insane.
Play cool, man. They don't know. They don't know.
Yeah, literally. I was just like, holy crap, these things sound so good. I was like nervous. It was weird. And I was like, man, I'd never had that reaction to a cymbal before. Like, sure, I'd hit stuff that I thought sounded great, but like it came with the price tag that was like that. And I was like, how the fuck can anyone justify, you know, spending the money on Constantinople's or whatever else when you can get a cymbal that sounds just as fucking good for way less? And I mean, you know, like it was a game changer. So I remember bringing those into, you know, like we had a performance like a week later or something. So it was my first time using them. And oddly enough, like in a strange circle of things, like it was like a work expo, and like all my teachers from my little country town school had like brought a bunch of students up. So I was like performing in front of like my original like rural community school, being like, huh? And they were like, oh my God, you actually did it. You actually dropped out of school and you actually like went and did something. I was like, oh, cool. But the cymbals sounded amazing. So from that point on, I was like, this is great. Like, I've never been one to chase an endorsement for the sake of like, you know, saying I've got it. Like, I've turned down 2 stick endorsements at this point. You know, I've had offers from other things. I only want to endorse it if I actually use it and I think it's good. That's why my list is CNC and Dream, because I love both of those companies. I think they both do something very unique. So yeah, like then I ended up like when they started coming into Australia properly through, I think, Dynamic Music at the time, just so happened to kind of get connected with the guy who, or at least see like a post on Facebook from the guy who was like repping him at the time. His name was Christian. I got in touch with him, and I was on tour at the time. I was in Canberra and had an off day, and he was like, yeah, dude, like shoot us a pack, like all your info and stuff. Let us know what you do and we'll talk about it. I put it together that afternoon again, you know, hurrying to wait around. So I just shot it together, emailed it to him. And then he said like, cool, when are you next in Sydney? Let's do it. Let's sign a contract. And I was like, we're literally coming in there tomorrow. So I drove in the next day and signed the contract, and that was it. I was part of the team. So it was like this really bizarre, like I'd been working, like almost using them exclusively since I was like fucking 19, 18 or something. And then fast forward a few years, I had the opportunity to connect with the guy, and bang, it was just like done deal. And I've never looked back. They're just fantastic. The team has looked after me fantastically over the years. They're super supportive of, you know, what I've done as a professional drummer, but also now what I'm doing with the academy. Like, they look after my students, you know, they're offering them discounts on things and making sure that they're getting set up with cymbals that are, you know, good quality to be learning on. You know, we all know what it's like learning with fucking zillion ZBTs or something, and it's just like, cool, I sound like trash no matter how good I get at drums. Like they're able to like help the students here actually like kind of realize what sounds they like and you know develop a bit of a sonic identity. So yeah, I have nothing but love for that company, and you know,
which I think you did touch on something really interesting, which kind of was leading me into my last question that I did have for you. Before I have my other last question,
hit me with it.
So the big thing was you said you never have chased an endorsement for a product that you've never really believed suited what it is. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the statement of that endorsements are there to serve a purpose and not in the sense of representation, but in physically needing this product to work for you, you know. And it seems like Dream fits that bill for you very well, and you turned down stick companies because you felt this isn't a product I use regularly enough to be able to do it. Even though as a drummer, you would imagine our 2, maybe 3 biggest endorsements that we would want even before drums is a head endorsement, a stick endorsement, and a cymbal endorsement.
Yeah, the things we break.
The things we break, what we literally call our breakables. So in reality to that, I would love to hear more of your thoughts on how endorsements should serve drummers in the sense of why you should actually be looking for one instead of the wrong reasons of clout and you know, all of that kind of stuff. I would just love to hear your thoughts on that a little bit more.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said the word right there. It's all clout, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. When I was a 17-year-old surfing the PDF, I would see all these drummers with their cool endorsements and stuff, and I was like, man. And I just wanted to be Aaron Gillespie back in the day. So I was like, give me that Meinl endorsement. Give me that Truth Drum Co. endorsement, which, like, let's put this into context, right? If I was, say I was in a cool band at that point and I got those endorsements, what would that have done for me in Australia? Meinl had like 0 footprint in Australia, so they would not have been able to like hook me up with cymbals at the drop of a hat. So for example, like if I'm out on tour and I break a cymbal, I can call up the guys, you know, at Riffs and Licks now, who are the distributors of Dream here in Australia, and be like, yo, Anthony, I fucked up. Can you like, you know, overnight me a cymbal? And he'd be like, yeah, sure. Done. Right? Couldn't have done that back in the day. And then, okay, so why do you have a drum kit endorsement? Because you need like backline hire help. You know, when you're flying everywhere and you can't take your drums or it's impractical, right? You get a hire deal, right? So you get half price hire or free hire or whatever the deal is, right? Depends how cool you are. Depends how big of a neon sign you've got. So, you know, you call up, you go, yo, Jared at CNC, like, I'm here. Can I get a kit? And he'll be like, yeah, cool, no worries. And like, it's sorted. It's just fucking dropped off and delivered to you. Truth Drums at the time, no footprint Australia. They're a custom drum company based in the US. Nothing, right? So like to have an endorsement is great because you feel like, man, my drum dick just got a little bit bigger, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's cool. But what does it do for you other than like you can say it on TikTok and people can be like, yay, clappy hand emoji, like who cares, right?
And it's like, and then what?
Then what, right? And also like you're going, look at me, I endorsed this company and they gave me fucking 10% off a kit. Like you ain't endorsed by that, brother.
Yeah.
And also then like, you know, you're out there spruiking them saying, everyone go buy these drums. They're great. They're great. They're great. They're great. They're great. Are they? I don't know. Maybe. Have you gone and tested them out on the road? Have you played 15 different varieties of them? Not just the one that you own, but like all the fucking rando backline kits that you get. Like, do they actually stand up to the test of time? You know? I did my first few Mark of Cain tours without an endorsement. First kit, I played pearls because I was like, yeah, whatever. They sound like drums. It'll do. And then I had conversations with our backline team who were just like, yeah, like, let's get you an endorsement. And they were like, do you want to, we know the people at DW, Gretsch, blah, blah, blah. We can sort it out. And I said, no. I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. And then one guy was like, what about CNC? And I was like, a CNC coming into Australia? Like, is that a thing? Because I love bands like Thrice, you know, like Riley from Thrice was a huge CNC guy back in the day. So I was like, fuck yeah. Like, I'd only played one of their kits previously, but all of my favorite drummers were on that team. So when that kind of came in, I was like, dang. But it was a working relationship at first. It wasn't an endorsement. It was like, you know, I got bounced around to a few different things until I finally like got connected with Jared from CNC. And he was just like, yeah, cool. We're not taking on any new artists at the time. But let me know if you want to get a kit and I'll help you out. So he gave me like a pretty heavily discounted kit when I did order it, but I wasn't part of the team because he was like, yeah, I'd rather have this guy like playing the drums and getting them out there and all this sort of stuff. And then when the time was right, he was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's make you part of the team and like do it properly. And like, it feels very natural. And like they're doing, like I'm doing them a favor by being like, everyone go and buy this stuff. But they do me a favor by like helping me out when I need to. And it's not just like, backline hire. Like you can have other arrangements with your companies that help them too. Like for right now, like Jared from CNC Australia lives in New York, right? So he's not boots on the ground. So he actually needs people in each state to like help deliver kits because most of their stuff is custom order. So he does this like cool thing with CNC called the Drum Butler service, where he gets his CNC artists to set up and deliver kits to people who have ordered them. So instead of just getting a box and go, here's your box from Missouri, motherfucker, set it up, right? Like that sucks. You've spent like $4 or $5 grand on a new kit and you get a box that you got to put together. Like that's shit. If someone rocks up and like someone like me who, I do drum teching and shit. So like I make that thing sound amazing. Half the time I just want to keep the drum kits. But then I deliver it to your door. I help you set it up, take a little video, photo, whatever. It's like this awesome service. And he'll just like flick me, $150 or something. He's like, yo, dude, like take a couple of hours out of your Sunday night and like just deliver this to someone. And it scratches their back. It scratches my back. It's like a fun thing. I've got students out of it because like you're delivering kits. So I'm like, oh, cool, you teach. This is the sort of relationship you want to be having with your companies, not just like, yeah, like use my code to get 15% off fucking Vader sticks. Like, fuck off.
Yeah, literally. And I feel like that's the common misconception too. I feel that people have is like, yes, there is the cloud aspect to it. And I'm not one to say that that's not a thing.
It is important too. Like, don't get me wrong. It's a validating thing being like, I'm endorsed by this company. I mean, that's why it's in my bio. Like I'm playing the game just like everyone else.
Exactly. Like it is, as I said, it is an important aspect of it too. But then it's the aspect of like, what purpose does it serve you behind the scenes? It's like, yeah, it's cool, I've got an endorsement, but like what does it actually do for me? And that's the big thing that I think a lot of people forget, that it's like it is a two-way street. They don't just endorse you and send you free shit. It's just like, well, what am I doing also to not only help further the brand, but like how is this actually going to serve me apart from bragging rights? And
that's right.
So that, I thought it's really interesting to hear you talk about those two. Again, very, very similar perspectives with that. So my last question for you, mate, before I let you go is, what is one crucial life lesson that you've learned throughout your entire career that you feel is crucial to you, not only getting success, but maintaining success?
Ooh,
spicy question.
That's a big one. Crucial life lesson. I think, I mean, it's a bit of a generic answer, but don't be a fuckwit. And what I mean by that is like, no one wants to work with a punisher. No one wants to work with someone who's difficult, has too many opinions. Like I've got opinions. I like to get on my soapbox, but I know when to shut the fuck up, right?
Yeah.
I'm on a podcast right now. You want to hear my opinions. That's the point. Usually I'm not this opinionated, but except when I'm scrolling through Instagram first thing in the morning with my coffee. Just being like, shit.
My wake up rant.
Fucking one-handed rubbish.
Guilty myself too.
Yeah, right. We all know who we're talking about. Anyway, like I think it's important to try to be someone that's enjoyable to spend time with. Like, I think a lot of musicians, like we're all pretty reserved people usually. There's a part of us that likes obviously getting out on stage, but there's also a lot of us who are pretty like insular people. And I think, when you, especially in a touring environment, that can really be difficult. I'm sure we've all, those of us who've been in that situation can relate to like having that one person on the tour bus who's just like so passive aggressive when they're tired,
or Debbie Downer, or
exactly, yeah, and or even the opposite where they just don't shut up. Like if you've got someone who's just like so overwhelmingly like on all the time, when you're around them for 17 hours a day, it's too much. So it's about like being cool to work with. And I think that will serve you if you get into like working with like solo artists, because there's an important distinction to make there. And this is something that I learned pretty hard doing my work as an MD. They're the boss. You know, it's not like a band where everyone's in it together. There's a hierarchy. And if you're not the boss, shut the fuck up and do your job, you know? Pick your battles. Don't be like a pushover, but like don't have an issue with every little thing that you don't like. Remember that it's someone else's name on the banner, you know? And you know, in recording scenarios, you know, you're doing pickup gigs on a session, right? If you're not prepared and you're a little nervous going in and you start fucking everything up, and then you get a little bit moody, or you know, like the artists want you to play something different because it's their song, but you don't like it or you're not very good at it, and that sort of comes to a head, they're not going to hire you again, you know? It's about being prepared going into things so that you can go in with confidence, and people can feel like they're getting a good result from hiring you or working with you. And then if you're a good person, like, you're going to get more work. Like, most of the time that I get people like hitting me up for fill-in gigs and whatever else, it's got very little to do with the fact that like I can play the drums. Like, if anything, like, it's about how good of a hang you are. I've got some students who are like great drummers, but they are struggling to get work. And it's not because they can't play the drums. It's because there's only a small amount of work in our city. And maybe they're not as fun of a person to be around with as the person who got the gig, you know?
And it's not saying that they're not fun, but it's just
it's like, not, no. These are all great people, right? But if you've got like the life of the party who can also play the drums pretty well and isn't a punisher to work with, you know, they don't drink too much, they don't party too hard, they're just fun to be around. Cool. I've hired people when I've been auditioning for bands who weren't the best player because they were a great hang. Like, you know, most of the dudes in Life Pilot will admit that, like, yeah, like, you know, we're just fucking jack-offs who play guitar or whatever. Like, but they are some of the funniest, most enjoyable human beings to be around. I'd rather play music with them. I don't care if you're, you know, the next Toast and Abasi. Like, I don't care, you know?
Yeah. And I feel that that's an integral part too that people forget, is like, you could be the best player, but if you are a robot of a person, it's like you have to be the best of the best to get it, irrespective of personality.
Exactly. It's coming back to what we were saying about being like, you know, good enough, and then to be the best, you've just got to be like so much better. It takes so much time. I feel
there's like, it's the 10,000 hours that you get to that point to then the 1 million hours.
Yeah.
The leap is just astronomically so much bigger.
Exactly. Yeah. And then people are willing to trade it off, you know. Then if you're like someone like, you know, like Matt Gartzker is a great example of this. Like, I'm sure he's a great guy. I've never actually met the dude other than like at a clinic very briefly, but like, you know, he by his own admission is like, he's got an ego. He's a very competitive guy, right? And I'm sure like he's a seasoned touring drummer. I have no doubt that like he's a great hang, but at the same time, like, you know, you're around people fucking 4 months at a time or whatever. You might get a bit over him being like, I bet you can't do this, or I bet you just like, like, I'm having a bad day. Can you just shut up? Like,
sorry, man. I'm feeling very introverted today,
right,
dude.
exactly.
I just want to sit in my corner and listen to my sad boy music and
my coffee. But then you go like, he's the best drummer in the world. Oh, who cares? He's in my band, right? Like, you deal with that. But if you're okay at drums and you're a bit of a jerk or whatever, then it's going to be a hard time. It's going to be a hard sell for people, you know? And I think that's really the thing.
You get into you're in for a rude awakening. Put it that way.
Put it this way. It's very rare that I actually hear of people leaving bands for musical reasons. Everyone says, oh, we get a difference of opinion on creative. No, it doesn't. They sucked and you didn't like them. So you went with someone who was a better hang, right? You don't often see people being replaced with band members who are like drastically better, unless it's like your very first band or whatever. You know, when you're actually out there on the road, like, everyone can play passably. It's more about a personality thing, you know? So when you find a collection of people who work well together, that's fantastic.
100%, dude. So look, I got to say thank you so much for your time today, Eli, man. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to talk a whole bunch of crap. Well, we've got to get you back on and actually get a couple of themed things, because I feel like you and I can talk for hours at this point, man.
That Pearl Drummers Forum is coming in. I'll be there. We'll do a big round table.
Yeah, I'm down. Let's pull a few people in.
That would be sick.
Let's give a history lesson to these youngins.
All these Zoomers.
What we're talking about. Yes. Well, look, guys, thank you so much. Eli, I really appreciate your time, man. And I look forward to the next time we actually will sit down and get the chance to have another discussion, man.
Absolutely, bro. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute blast.
My pleasure, guys. Take care, and we will see you in the next episode.